In this video, I'm going to be turning this cool looking jar into this beautiful forest ecosystem. Make sure to stick around to see the finished results. Every ecosystem starts with the jar. I got this cool one on Amazon. I'll try to put a link to it in the description. I think it's time for the drainage layer. This is where the excess water will sit instead of in the substrate. If there was no drainage layer, the terrarium would likely turn stagnant, leading to the terrarium's death. I then used these tweezers to pat it down and make it as flat as I can. It's now time for the substrate barrier. It prevents the substrate from getting into the drainage layer while still allowing water to freely pass through. I used screen mesh, but you can use something like weed barrier. I then cut the mesh down to size. I always reuse the mesh scraps for future builds. And it's okay if the substrate barrier is a little big, like mine was. It's now time for the key component of the terrarium, which is the substrate. I'll put the mix I use up on screen. It's a pretty good one. It's inevitable that some substrate will get to the drainage layer. It should be fine as long as it's not too much. I made a bit of a mess that I had to clean up. I then sloped the substrate up to the back for a sense of scale and depth. To keep the substrate in place when adding hardscape, I sprayed it all down. After that, I wiped the glass down. I'm now gonna add hardscape. I found this cool tree-looking piece in the wild. I chose it because it looks like a tree with roots branching out of the bottom. It's a little big, so I'll have to trim it down with some pliers. I wouldn't recommend using a saw as it could make it look unnatural. It's now a perfect fit. I think it would be cool to have a couple rocks scattered around it, so I decided to break this one up into pieces. When doing this, I wore shorts and a short sleeve shirt in snowy weather. I was now ready to start adding the stone hardscape around the terrarium. I'll try to put a link to the tweezers I used in the description. While you're here, why not consider liking and subscribing? It really helps out. It's now time for the moss. If anyone could identify these species in the comments, that would be really helpful. I trimmed the roots to some of the mosses I use so they sit lower. Thankfully, it won't kill the moss. In most of my terrariums, I use plenty of variations in species of moss. It gives it a more natural appearance. I was now finished adding moss. The moss always makes everything come together really well. The next thing was the leaf litter. I thought it would be cool to make a leafy path coming from the wood hardscape. Then I used tweezers just to scatter leaves around. And for more detail, I decided to get a cutting of Ficus pumila corsifolia. I plan to get more terrarium plants soon. And an ecosystem wouldn't be complete without the springtails. To put it simple, these little bugs will just keep your terrarium clean and healthy. I gently tapped them into the terrarium. And the last thing I did was give the ecosystem a heavy spray down. I put on the cork lid and the ecosystem was complete. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something from it. If you really liked this video, you can click on this other video I made, or you can go to my channel.